Okay,
Sorry.
we were told the meeting's being recorded, so I will be very nice to everybody because it's recorded. But I won't bore you with my whole work history, but I'll give you a little bit of, synopsis of it. I've worked in large-scale banks, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, CIT Group. I worked for the Hartford. These are all HR-related recruiting and/or HR positions. And I've worked in a few other industries, so I'm not just financial services. I've worked for 6 years in hospitality, and I also worked for a nonprofit company. So I'm pretty well versed in different companies and how they perceive candidates and negotiation. And I have been in a number of roles, one of which is a recruiter and interviewer. So I have actually, and a manager, negotiated with candidates. So I have firsthand knowledge, and I'm going to try to provide you with either stories or do's and don'ts from my perspective. And of course, I've been a candidate too, because how would I have gotten the other jobs if I didn't have to interview? So that's what I really bring to the table. And don't hesitate to ask any questions. Marion will pass it on to me, and we'll try to get you set. That's me. I'm excited about starting this program. Okay.
So I'll move the slide along, or just let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Yeah, I see the next slide. You can go ahead.
Okay. This, do you want to talk about this slide?
Yeah, how to negotiate, what to negotiate, and when to negotiate. And you're going to find out, I think, through this program that it's not a straight, simple answer. And that's why we need this amount of time to explain to you, give you tips, give you answers. So this is really what you're going to really learn, but we're going to burst apart all these bullets and take it into more detail. Next slide. Yeah, sometimes I belong to different HR networking groups, and I've worked in outplacement firms. I've been in outplacement firms. So, you have teams there. Somebody walks into the meeting and says, guess what? I got an offer. And everybody applauds and thinks, wow. But the offer isn't solidified. The person was made the offer, but they didn't accept yet. And they come, in one instance, they came to us and they wanted tips on how to negotiate salary. Sometimes you're so exhausted from getting an offer to a company you want to work for that you think, oh, I'm home free. And the negotiation, and they tell you the salary, you like it or not, but you think the hard part was done. Well, the hard part is just beginning, in my estimation, because that's where the rubber meets the road. You have to be very careful on what you ask for and how you ask for it. Next slide. Okay, I've been on the other side when I made an offer to a candidate and they said, thank you, I accept, like almost before I get the words out. Now, that's not really the best way to do it. I know sometimes candidates are scared. If I don't accept this offer right now, I'm sure there's 10 other candidates and they would accept the offer. So I'll just keep my mouth shut and accept the offer. That's the worst scenario. If you see at the bottom of the slide, never accept the job on the spot. Why? Because A, you seem too anxious. B, it seems like you're not going to give them a lot of value. You'll just take any job. And C, if you conduct your business and your job that way, it may scare a company that they don't ask more questions, that you're not asking questions, that you're not thinking it through. And that translates to maybe what they think would not be a good employer. And if they never gave it to you in writing, it could evaporate. They owe you nothing. They don't have to, they could change their mind and go on to someone else. It's very important for you to practice speaking up And this slide is very valuable. You have to acknowledge the offer, be very, very appreciative, be very anxious to work for the company, but it's very important that you ask for the offer in writing. Me being on the other side, making offers, I expect that. That is absolutely fine. So relax about asking for the offer in writing. And maybe give them your timeline. In other words, gee, I have to discuss it with my spouse, my partner. I have to think about it. Can I get back to you in X number of days? Be very polite. And that way you buy time to think more about the offer, continue to research what likely salaries or office would be in your field for that type of job. Reach out to your contacts, your friends, your counselors at Baruch, who will still talk to you after you've graduated, like Marion, and that's your time for you. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide really says what it is. There are so many different moving parts to a job offer. Usually, the higher you are in the ranks of a position, the more, I'll call them perks for now, more the perks are there. Less if it's your first job at a college, which is sort of obvious. When you get the offer in writing, these are things you should look into. Maybe make a list of, what the benefits are for yourself. Not to ask all of these. In fact, you see where it says personal and sick days, third bullet down on the second column? Promise me you will not ask that question if your life depended on it. That is the ultimate turnoff to a recruiter or a hiring manager. Here you are, you haven't even worked there, you haven't accepted the offer, but you're asking about time off, or do you have sick time? And by the way, most companies have sick time. You don't have to ask. And what's a personal day? 1 or 2 a year? Not good. Zoom in on 2 or 3 of these points that you absolutely want. And that could be, signing bonuses. Let's say your company knew that you worked at a good company and they're trying to hire you away. Well, you may want to consider a signing bonus because you're actively employed and, you may lose a little seniority if you leave your company. So that's something you may want to think about. Something else to think about is professional development in a way that shows you want to do your absolute best and be of strong value to the company. So you like to keep learning, you like to keep growing. That's another example. The rest you could just, pick a few that you want. Next.
I just want to also
Yes.
add to this slide is these are sort of typical average content that would be in a job offer. So of course, when you do, or if you do get offered multiple offers, don't just look at the compensation, but just start creating some sort of comparison between all the different packages. So, some companies might offer 2 personal days, some companies might offer 3, and so forth. Some companies provide unlimited sick days, some offer 10. So when you're looking at a package, never just look at the compensation. And so time is money for a lot of people. So is health and dental insurance, for example, is it covered, is it not covered? How much are you paying for one offer versus the other offer? So don't be mindful that a job offer includes a lot of these things, and be mindful that it's never just about the first bullet, which is the compensation.
Right, exactly. And this is where it's not just about what you're asking, it's how you handle it. A number of candidates that I've made offers to think they're home free. Once the interview process is over, they know that we like the candidate. And, there's the last step is you talk about salary. So with all that you might have tried during the interview process, you were really careful about what you said, you researched the company, you communicated obviously well to the company because they like you enough to want to hire you. Don't mess it up at this point. This is a key place where it could be messed up. Remember, they're not required to hire you at this stage. Okay, next. It really says it here in the slide. It's harder to get a lot of increase in salaries or package when you're in entry level and you may bring less to the table, regardless of the fact that you have great education from Baruch. Mid-level positions, it starts to grow a little more, and a lot of companies have salary ranges. So it's not just that they want to offer you X salary, they probably have a range in mind. And I can tell you from myself, whenever I made an offer, I always had a range in mind, even if the company didn't have ranges, because I've worked for companies that didn't have ranges. I had a number in mind, and usually there was a variable, the top that I could offer. I never offered the top of the range first. It's almost like if you were looking for a co-op or condo or a rental, and the landlord or the owner of the co-op said, this is my price, I'm making this up. To buy this condo, it's $100,000. Well, that person really could be negotiated. That person, maybe if they got 80,000, they'd be very happy. So it's another reason that the offer doesn't always have the highest price. And my offers never had the highest price. I could tell you that. The ones that I handled myself.
There's a question that came in. The person's a seasoned professional worker who's been in the industry for a long time but got laid off. And then what she wants to know is how assertive, how should she be when she's negotiating a package, or should she rethink the process? Should she even aggressively negotiate if she got laid off from her previous job?
Oh, so this is sort of the inverse, where, if I got it correctly, Marianne, that it's not that she was negotiating a new offer, it was negotiating the best package, leaving that company, whether it be severance or coverage for insurance. Is that the question?
No, I think it's more of she got laid off. She's a seasoned professional who got laid off, but now, she's might get offered a new position. Should she even negotiate, knowing that, she might not be able to get another job? So I think what a lot of people sometimes fear is that, how aggressively should I negotiate if
Right.
I need a job?
That is an excellent, excellent question. Thank you for asking it. And, sooner or later, almost all of us experience that. And I think that sometimes when somebody's been laid off, whether it's due to what they're doing, due to coronavirus, due to the company, not being able to, had to lay off a bunch of people, you are coming from a slightly lower negotiation point. However, and it's a big however, keep in mind your value to the company. Keep in mind all that you can bring to the organization. Tell yourself that all the time. You're as good as the next person. The important thing is get your story together, which you probably would have done well in the interview if they wanted to make you an offer, on why this company needs you and why you're excited about working for the company. And my little trick when I'm the candidate is, when I'm asked that question, well, why were you laid off? Yeah, we're offering you X because, you're between jobs. I would think about it, and I would say that I would change the subject. I would just answer and say, whatever, I was laid off because of the coronavirus, or I was laid off because they're moving to another location. And then change the subject and be prepared to ask another question. I find it works all the time. So in other words, you answer the question, you don't go on and on, you make it very, very short and move on. And nowadays, most employers understand it. The employers themselves could have been out of work between jobs. The longer you work, and Marianne, you said the person was seasoned, they're out of work. So you know, they were out of work too sometime. The person you're talking to, I'll bet you anything that most people that you talk have been laid off for various reasons. So you're one of a million people. So just take it out of your mind, move on, and then pick up with the rest of, you know, what's being discussed.
We have
And,
another
you know,
question too.
okay.
What is the best way to negotiate when your work anniversary is coming up? Or this
You
sort
mean
of goes in hand.
negotiate?
Yeah, if your work anniversary, I guess your appraisal's coming up, your performance appraisal's coming up. What's
Uh,
the best way to negotiate that?
yeah,
Or if you're moving internally, like whether that's up or laterally, what's the best way to negotiate? So those are a couple of questions.
that's really great. So this is an internal move or an internal promotion or just an increase at your annual, if I have it correctly.
Correct.
Uh,
Yeah, correct.
if you're going to do that, yeah, if you're going to do that, I would personally is telling you, always know, make a list of your accomplishments. You know, sometimes a person's boss may not even realize what you've accomplished. You know, everybody gets busy. Maybe your manager has, you know, 40 people on his team, or he's 2 levels away from you, but you're meeting with him or her. And they don't remember that you helped to win some good business a half a year ago. And you know what? You may not remember exactly what you did a half a year ago either. Or you're a supervisor and you don't remember off the top of your head what every single person has done in the full year. You have to remind them. You have to make it easy. So come prepared with what you've accomplished on your job, plus what you plan to bring to the table going forward. Whether it's that you want a higher level job, you think you deserve it, whether it's that you are so entrenched in the company that you really understand what makes the company tick and you have extreme value to the company. And you know, tell a story or two, give an example, and then don't say anything. And you know, a lot of times a manager may say, oh, let me think about it. And that's fine. Let them think about it because they're being caught off guard, don't forget. So, and then you may decide not to pressure them. Like, I know I'm just bringing this up to you now. I know you may not remember some of those things that I had done, which I just, you know, reminded you. So, you know, I'm not in a rush. Take a little time to think about it and reiterate that you want to work for the company, you love the company, and your value to the company. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'll add to that is if you are sort of thinking about having a conversation and renegotiating your package, I think you need to, what Patty says is definitely obviously bring to the table why you deserve that, which is sort of your performance and what you've done. But you also want to be mindful about what other things have you done that you deserve an increase in whatever it may be, whether it's benefits, vacation days, etc., compensation. So sort of the thing you need to think about is, in addition to just doing your job, what else are you bringing to the table? Are you actively helping with recruiting, even if the recruiting is not your function? Are you part of an employee resource group internally to help sort of the business and the branding? Are you doing other things outside the universe, outside your company that you're working for, that can help brand the company to other places? So are you volunteering? So think about those things. So doing your job is great, absolutely, but I'm sure everyone else is doing their job. And so it's important to think about, as you become more and more seasoned, what other things are you bringing to the table to make sure that you deserve that increase in whatever that may be, whether it's compensation or benefits. So another question, different from that, is do layoffs typically happen with some severance package? Meaning, are there a few months pay while being laid off that you know about, or your experience with, Patty?
Okay, this is a question I can't answer yes or no
Yeah.
because it's all over the map. Usually, I mean, if it's a large company and or you're high up enough in the ranking, most likely they're going to give you some sort of package. Usually when they give a package, they want you to sign a document to say that I've received, you know, if I do X, I'll receive this amount of money.
Yeah.
Built in them, it's really a legal document. And I don't know any companies that don't have you sign that. So if you're signing it, you have to be very careful. You have to be careful on what they're saying, how much severance they're giving you. You shall not hold the company harmless for anything. There's a whole array. Sometimes they even offer outplacement, whether it be internal, an internal department that does outplacement if they're large, or it could be, you know, a month or two or more in a professional outplacement firm or virtual outplacement. So, but it's very rare that a company would just lay a bunch of people off and not give them any severance. It used to be that companies would think, oh, well, Fred will get unemployment, so we don't have to do anything. Usually packages are the case. So it's very important to most likely, and you may want to, you know, keep your ear to the ground to see if your company who might have laid off somebody last year or someone else gave them a package, you know, particularly if it's someone you know. And, you know, you'll probably get a package unless you're a recent grad. And sometimes even if somebody just left a job to come to that company, and maybe they're not even at a higher level, but they gave up their previous job to join the company, nobody told you, you know, told them they're going to be given, you know, are not no longer going to work there. So usually, and I've done this myself, I feel bad if somebody, you know, left a company, they worked there for 3 months, and then there were orders to, you know, terminate, you know, part of the sales department. You want to be a good employer, so I wouldn't lose sleep about it.
Let me just add to that. We'll move on. There's a few more questions, but I think we're going to address it as we move on to the other slides.
Okay.
I think the reason why that's a difficult question to answer is it really depends on each company and each person in a way. So, you know, having had that experience too, where you basically have to lay off people and what package you're going to give people, it really varies. I think that's where Patty kind of struggles, because they don't have to, depending on the situation that the person is in, but they should as a company, but you know, it's a business. So, but I think what Patty's also saying, knowing what you want to ask for, that sort of layoff package is also a place where you can negotiate that package. So that's something, but there's no like, you're entitled to 6 months, you're entitled to 2 months. There's no legal things that says you're entitled to a certain number of months, even if you've been working there for a certain time. There are sort of on a company basis. And yeah, having worked at other companies, corporate and higher ed, they all have different rules about that. So, but the other questions, I think will be answered as we move on to the other slides. And just for time's sakes, I'm sure we all want to go home or do something else besides the Zoom after this. So let's just move on to the other slides. But if it does, I will be sure to address these questions towards the end if they never get answered. Thank you. All right. All right, Patty, you're on again.
Okay. I think we've been making the point that there are a lot of things that are negotiable, and it's more than salary. And here, you know, again, the higher you are, the more likely you might get a sign-on bonus if you're quitting your job to go to them and they really want you. It could be that, you know, if you help to bring in a certain client, maybe you're not the front salesperson, but you're the person that does a lot of the reports, so you're a subject matter expert. You know, they may, as long as they know that you were part of the team, you know, you may get a bonus. Some companies that, you know, have stock will give stock options, but, you know, that's not all the time. And even stock options can change. They could, you know, if they give you options and it's at a high price for the stock, and then the stock goes down and you're leaving the company, it may not be worth that much, but the opposite could be true, which is what happens with IT companies a lot. And relocation, I think that's sort of obvious, because if they're asking you to move across the country, they're going to pay for your move. They really are. So every company has their own package. What they do, they usually have an expert in the company or outside the company to talk to you about what the package is to relocate. Okay. Sometimes this is a good slide in terms of the professional training, continuing ed membership, not so much the conference attendance or memberships, but if a company's a certain size, they should be concerned about your training. Nobody's going to want to just continue in the same job, the same thing, and not want to learn more about new developments, not want to be sent to continuing education, or if you have a license to get certified, certification credits, you're a lawyer, you're in HR, they know, and they will even give you time to do it, but you could certainly ask. It's not a question that they will be taken aback about, really. And every company is different with performance reviews. I know telecommuting will probably be big when everybody's back from lockdown. Those of you who are, I'm one of them. So that's going to continue to be a big thing. Maybe telecommuting will just come up and you're interested in it because people are starting to like the idea of not having to take subways, etc. So, if you want to ask that, ask it, but I wouldn't be, it's not your top thing, I think, to work on. If they start doing telecommuting and they ask who wants to leave the office and work at home, that's where you raise your hand.
It's on the next slide. I don't know if you want to move, how quickly you want to move.
How to negotiate is the next slide, which is a lead-in, I guess. Okay, Marion and myself have talked about values throughout, and we can't stress enough how important that is, and how important you have an opportunity to really be happy at your job and get what you deserve, and it's not always salary. So when you're looking at this slide, think of what's the most important thing to you. Some companies have a wonderful workplace. They're very big on employee engagement. They involve employees. They do probably less now after the virus. They have picnics, they have competitions, they have runs in Central Park, or they just they have profit sharing. I've seen that for all levels of employees sometimes. They have all of this going. Or maybe the bullet on flexibility. Maybe you do feel strongly about working 2 days a week at home, or just whatever they can offer for certain things where you can still reach out to your clients, still get your work done. I wouldn't push too many at once because they're going to think you just want everything. So in this slide, just decide on what's most important to you.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide.
Okay. Yeah, now again, it says plan ahead. We're telling you to plan ahead. It's really important that you know what you want. A negotiation is a win-win situation if done, professionally. So it's not, hey, I got another 10 grand, you tell your friend out of the recruiter, and originally she wasn't offering that to me. No, it's not that. It's where you've communicated your values, what you can do for the company. The recruiter or the hiring manager does have an ultimate number in mind, and it may not be the first offer. So you're not going to wreck the deal by doing it. In fact, it's a great opportunity to do another commercial for yourself. But after you get the offer and it's sent to you, whether it's by, email or even text these days, I've seen a few of those. Think about that. That's where you really have to decide what's most important. If it's salary, how much salary, and it's a good opportunity to talk again about what you can bring to the table.
So maybe this is a good time to ask to answer some questions. So, how can you know, like, how much percentage of increase a question came in, is what percentage of increase should you be looking at when you are looking for a title change and or additional roles?
Okay, I assume that's in the same company. I don't know, you may not know either.
It doesn't say. I would say both. Yeah.
Well, again, it comes back and keeping a log, keeping a file online of some great stuff you've done. You may have some of the stuff in your resume already before you went on the interview. You know, it's very easy for all of us when we're so busy and we're trying to meet deadlines for the company and do a great job working and maybe make up for the fact that your team member is not holding his or her own, and you don't get enough one-on-one time with your manager or someone else. I would just keep track of what you've done. And just like when you prepared your resume, take a look at some wonderful things you've done and tell a story about it. In other words, remind your manager about how you solved a problem that was a big deal in the company and you came up with a solution and the result. And have it just one or two, be ready to tell them and remind them, and they might be more willing to give a little more.
Hmm. So the other question is, how do you negotiate salary when it says salary increases are only done possibly once a year during a year-end review or promotion or change in rank within a company,
Okay, that's
within the same company?
that right. Okay, I'll tell you what I've seen. And again, all of this you can't predict for each company. There, and I'm not talking government, working for the government where everything is proscribed. Let's say a non-government company. A lot of companies in the past have done annual reviews, annual increases. If someone's bonus eligible, they may get a bonus depending on the profitability of the company and other factors. There's been a lot of pushback lately against companies that only do an annual review, and I'm not talking money here, an annual performance review, because you're telling, you're looking, taking a back look at at what you've done, and most managers can't recite a lot of the things that you did for a whole year going backwards, in addition to their other team members. So what happens is people get nervous for the annual review. The manager gets nervous because he or she says, gee, I don't remember what Jim did in all situations or what Susan did. I have to start looking back, and they're pressured, and they're pressured to get all the communications out by a deadline, because a lot of us HR people are reminding them you have to get it in by X date. So, you know, some companies are looking at different things. So in other words, I've worked for companies where they changed that along the way. The company that was privately held, a decent size, used to do annual reviews, and all of a sudden they changed. They figured what, you know, they want to do it a little more often. They want to give some money along the way as a positive reward for some employees that have done well. So, or corporate sends down something and says, you know what, we're only giving increases for employees that are at a certain level, or the IT department. And then they could decide again, no, let's go back to annual. So it's really hard to know, you know, for the future, even companies who think they know.
Yeah. Let me add to that. I think what's important is the second bullet where it says do your research. It really is important to understand what someone like yourself in the same position, similar title, similar years of experience, what you should generally get paid for the most part. It's never going to be exact, but you should do your research so that you have a baseline for what your position is worth within that organization. So that's important to know. Not to say that you're going to go ask everyone that you work with, but you got to do some research so that you have a general number that you're thinking about. So for example, you know, I've worked in higher education, I've worked in corporation. So having worked, I remember going from higher ed and working in a corporation is a big jump for a lot of people. So it's not the same industry. So I remember my pay working in higher education was not as great as when I became a technical recruiter. And I remember I just took the role because that was my first technical recruiter role for a big tech company. And I remember after a year, less than a year, I got my appraisal. And I remember doing my research, and the bump in my salary was a lot greater, at least my proposal was, because of when I benchmark how much should my position really be paid was different now that I've worked in that company and I'm able to showcase my skill. And of course, you know, they honored that request. but only because I was able to say, because my previous role was in a different industry versus this industry standard. So doing that research and getting that example, like Patty mentioned earlier, is important so that you're not just asking for more money for no reason because you just feel like it. That's important to have some backing to that request rather than just saying you require more money or require other packages within your what you're already
Right.
offered.
Right.
I think also like another question is how like the salary increase. I think it's hard to know like what you should be asking for. I mean, you have to, it should always be more if you're moving internally or a different organization, and because you are sort of the new person in that company or in that department, which means that it's sort of high risk if something happens, like COVID, that you might be the first to go, right? So that's
Yeah.
one question about like how much money to ask for when you're negotiating from your previous salary.
And also, if you've worked at the company, let's say they have annual reviews, you probably become friendly with other people that work in your department or in your field. And, as an HR manager, I used to get upset that people were sharing their increases after they were communicated or sharing their bonuses. And then I realized, you know what, it happens all the time. It's human nature. You're not going to write up someone because they discuss salary with another like employee. Don't worry about it. Think of yourself too. You're having lunch with someone and just add it to the conversation. So how did you do on your increase? Were you happy with it? An open-ended question, not necessarily
Yeah,
what do you make?
yeah.
And that along the way, along the year, and it starts making sense on, what the company is prepared to pay. Also read up on the company, find out if they're not doing as well this year, or they got some new business, the opposite. So see how their profitability and be very, very knowledgeable about whatever's made public about the company and their finances.
Another question came in. How should you respond during the interview process when a recruiter asks you about your salary expectation?
Okay. Until recently, and for a period of time in New York City, and it might be the state, but I know it's New York City, and I think it might have gone to New Jersey. We weren't, as interviewers, we weren't allowed to ask what their current salary is or their last salary, because the theory, and let me explain it, it's not totally logical, it's partially logical. The theory is if someone was always at a low salary and then they were asked what their salary is, the recruiter or the manager will just say, oh, okay, I'll add 5% to that, and Susan will be happy because it's 5% more. It's not good reasoning, because if someone is already underpaid, if they're going to be forever trying to get a leg up and not get little tiny increases, especially if they're changing jobs and companies. So, we're not really supposed to ask it. I know of recruiters who find ways to find out. For instance, if you're discussing salaries and maybe your recruiter knew that he or she wasn't supposed to ask what your salary is, and then you see the recruiter looking puzzled, gee, I don't know what to offer you. I don't even know what you make. If the employee offers it and says, look, I'll tell you, this is what I earned in my last job. I'm leaving the job. Why would I leave the job for not much more than what I have? Very politely, end of story. And you're providing them with information, and that's fine. If you want to provide what you got before, and it's something that you think is decent, but you want more because you're leaving a job, that's okay. The other scenario is, what if you were about to get a bonus from the company? Let's say the bonuses are given out either in December or January, and you're leaving the bonus on the table to go to the next company. Well, if you're doing that, that's an excellent negotiation tool. It's very, very understandable. You think you're getting normally you would get a 10% bonus, and last year you got a 12% bonus. Or tell them that. and they may ask you for proof because it's not your base salary, they will keep that in mind. They will go back to the table and usually will say, I understand you would have gotten a bonus in 2 months. We're giving you X, whatever way they want to do it. So keep that in mind also.
Now, I just want to add that when a recruiter or a hiring manager opens that conversation, your strategy is not to give the number first. Your strategy is try to get the employer, the company, to give that range. Because if you give a range and it's lower than what they're willing to pay, then you've sort of lost that money. So for me, the strategy would be to ask the recruiter what the range is. So your role, your job as a possible employee is to ask what the range is rather than provide the range for them. Right. And then once you get that range, then for me also what Patty says, depending where you are, how seasoned you are, how experienced, what you have, what you bring to the table, is think about what was your health benefits and your vacation days. Start thinking about that and what is the next package, so that you're not just looking at salary as the only thing you should be concerned about when you get a new package or a package offer. Be mindful, like health and dental could cost a lot of money. If that's something that was free for you, having worked in higher education in different companies, a lot of times my benefits were free and they were premium. And because that was like negotiated by the union, etc. And so if I go to a company and I have to pay now $400 to $500 a month, that's $400 or $500 a month that I'm losing. So that's part. So if I'm moving to a next company, I got to be mindful of that. So when you're negotiating a new package, don't be mindful of the salary, but try not to give the range, and then include all the other stuff that's included in that, because that's time is money in my values, and that's important. So if I'm getting more vacation days in one company and I'm losing that in a different company, that somehow should be compensated somehow or another. So those are things that you should be thinking about when you're negotiating a package.
Right, and that's very fair. You should not be afraid to do that. I would ask that all the time. If you help the recruiter or the hiring manager, if they have to ask for more money for you, that's good. You're giving them information to take to their boss on why they need to top it off with more money.
Okay, so let's move on. I clicked on the next slide. We have some more questions. We'll get to it later on today.
Okay. Yeah, these are just good places, besides asking your friend what they earn and, other people in the same industry at different companies, that these are places to go to. They're not be it end all, but you get a good sense of the ranges that certain industries, certain companies tend to pay. So, just look at it. I know Glassdoor also, and I feel mixed about Glassdoor because sometimes people just put their complaints on Glassdoor. But they do have what they think is the range. It's not always accurate, but it doesn't hurt to look. And LinkedIn is very good. LinkedIn is also, I know it's not on the slide, but LinkedIn has a number of free videos that they offer on a lot of different topics for job hunting, recruiting. I think they have stuff in negotiation. There may even be, I didn't look this up, but there may be TED Talks. They're very popular, and TEDx, which are just an offshoot of it that you can get for free online. And Google it. I'm sure there's going to be TED Talks talking about negotiation and how to put your best foot forward, how to determine salary. So it's just something else to look at.
Okay. I moved on to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, every company is different, and while you're interviewing, even if you didn't get the offer, you may want to do your research before you even get the offer. See what they're doing, see how successful they are these days. And I know all these industries are changing as we speak, due to the coronavirus, due to people not being able to go to stores or use travel services. So even if you did research before, I would keep on top of that whenever possible. And of course, the Star Center. I've known people at the Star Center for a long time at Baruch. They are wonderful. They're better. My graduate work was at NYU, and which was more expensive, and my undergraduate was the CUNY system with classes at Baruch. I got much better guidance at this. I don't know if it was called the Star Center then, but it was similar. So smart people use the Star Center all the time.
Oh, sorry. We have the next slide about bottom line.
Right. Yeah, you really have to just start jotting down things little by little on what's important to you. I would also recommend that, minimum comp, I think, is important, but also keep in mind that, what the job is you're getting, and practice, a communication exercise with yourself, and then with a friend or with Star, the way you might do a mock interview through Star. You could do a mock, proposal on, what you're looking for in terms of negotiating if you had an offer. The more you practice, just like interviews, the more you practice, the more you think, oh no, I messed that up. I didn't answer the question properly. Or the feedback I got from the career counselor at Star or somewhere else, my friend in industry, was that I didn't show my value appropriately. Get a lot of that out of the way. So when you get the offer, you'll be more comfortable in communicating your needs.
I think that's a good point, Patty. That you definitely don't want to just ask for things. What's also important, what Patty's saying, is how you ask for things. So it's important, the right tone, the right timing. I know a lot of questions have been around COVID in the chat. You have to sort of gauge and understand sort of the environment. Of course, I'm always all about discussing a conversation around package and things like that. But of course, you have to be mindful. If for the last 6 months you've not been getting a lot of great feedback about your performance, probably not the best time to really push that you deserve more things. So you have to sort of understand where you stand with the company and your supervisor. So that's important to understand. But any type of negotiation is going to have a level of risk, and that's something that you have to understand. If that's something that you're comfortable with. But for the most part, I think from my experience, having negotiated different companies, it really is open up for conversation. So it never hurts to have a conversation about that. It's that time it's 7 o'clock. So if you hear a lot of noises, it's the buildings around me that's making all that noise for our first responders. So thank you. Yeah. So
yeah.
if you hear a lot of pots and horns, that's because that's to celebrate our first responders and our grocery workers and all that great staff that make time.
Could you just hold on a minute, please?
Sure, I'll take over from here. So let me answer some. Maybe this is some good time to answer some of the questions. So someone says best way to increase when you take on extra work voluntarily until another role is filled. I think depends should you negotiate an increase if you're taking on role? That's on a case by case basis, because if it's like 2 months or 3 months, I don't know if it will be worth you kind of creating that negotiation if it's not really going to do anything, if depending on the culture of the company. But for me, I know in my experience, people have asked if they're taking on a role, and depending how long it's going to be, they've been giving sort of stipends for them to fill that role. So there is things like that you can bring up. And I always say the best way to ask for any type of negotiation is in your nicest tone of voice. Say, is there room for negotiation? Something like that, There is a law in New York City that you're not supposed to verbally ask someone what they made in their previous jobs, but it doesn't stop people from asking it anyway, and they're not supposed to base their decision on information like that, but people still do. So that's, there are the things that's by law. I mean, you can try to call them out on it, but it's probably not going to go anywhere. So it's not one of those things that's worth the battle. Um, what was the other question? There was another question um,
I'm
oh,
back, by
like
the way.
in an application. So welcome back. In an application, if it asks you to give a number, again, if it asks a number, I try to say open for discussion, flexible. That's what I like to say in an
Right,
application,
right,
unless of course it forces you to have a number for whatever reason, like the field just won't move unless you put a value. Then that's something that you have to do your research on and give a bigger range, meaning don't give a huge range. Don't put like $0 to $1 million or something like that, but give an appropriate bigger range rather than if it forces you. But if it doesn't, just so for me, my suggestion is to put open, flexible, open for discussion.
right. And I love to see open on that because I know the person is intelligent. Maybe they attended a webinar like this one and realize they're educated, they understand, and that they don't have to put what they want. And as the recruiting head, my recruiting head, I know, oh, that person really understands. That's fine. And actually what I did on last company when they did come out with that, that law, is we just took it out of the application. We just changed that page. We don't ask what they're interested in. We don't ask what they were earning. Every time there's a new law, especially in New York City, about something, and we still have it there, like criminal backgrounds, something like that, we immediately change the application, and good employers will do that. So you're not even, having to deal with that.
Yeah. One other last question, and we'll move on to the next one is, what do you do if your current employer underpays you for your current role, taking into consideration the range, considering the range?
You mean, I guess the employee feels like they're underpaid?
Maybe they found out, like a new employee comes in and then they had a conversation,
Uh,
like they had coffee, whatever it may be, and then
right.
they realize they're underpaid because they just realize this new person gets paid more than they do.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that happens a lot. That's a very good question, whoever asked that. Um, ooh, it's true. And sometimes if I'm working with some candidates to hire them, and we were discussing, I was discussing it with my manager about what to pay someone, and then we say, well, if we give, you know, Donna an extra X amount of dollars, you know, we know word is going to get out and we're not going to look good. Either people are going to be, at our doorstep asking for more money, or it's ill will, in the company. And usually is a middle solution. For instance, if somebody brings something special to the table coming from their other company, then we have a reason, and we have a reason that could also be semi-public. If somebody comes to you and says, that person got a lot more than any of us, what's going on here? And you just say, well, look, we needed somebody who knew X, and then change the subject and move on. By the way, if you change the subject, it could be an interviewing, it could be negotiation, it could be getting asked a question like that. It's sort of a trick I learned from my counseling degree. In other words, you just answer very quickly something that sounds appropriate, and start asking that person another question and get them off the topic.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it works. Good for interviewing.
Yeah, this actually happened to a client of mine recently, about a month ago, and her colleague left to move to another job. And of course, they got close, they got to know each other, and that came up. And she found out that she was getting paid less than him, even though she hired him after her. So, of course, she went to her manager and said, she found out this new information and she expected to be compensated the same way. And the manager pushed back at first. It's a big company. I'm not going to say the company, a big company. But after she sort of laid it out why she thinks that's unfair and her expectation, they basically matched what that person was getting paid that left. So, of course, she asked around, which, like Patty says, there's nothing, companies shouldn't be fearful of that because people are going to do that anyway. And so people should be compensated the way they should be compensated, but it's not always that way. So, but it is important to have that conversation. For me, it's not best to name the person that you got the information from unless they left the company. But if they still work there, that's not a good etiquette to mention that you got that information from that person. It's best to keep
Right.
it anonymous. It's best to keep it private, but know that that's information that you are aware of. And you know, I worked as a diversity manager for a big company and for a credit rating company. And as a diversity manager, you have everyone's salary information. So that's one of the information that you have access to that maybe other people that in that company might have access to. So, you know, you start to realize there is differences in pay, but it also differences in how they negotiate. So it really is important to negotiate. And I worked as a technical recruiter for a tech company, and I would say that I've negotiated package where people with an undergraduate degree got paid more than someone with a PhD just because they did negotiate better and they brought their case more. So to me, now that I've seen it on both sides, be as a candidate versus me as an employee, as a HR person, it's important to at least have a conversation around it. It's not that it depends what you're bringing in, you're going to sort of aggressively push that even more. But you have to bring something in. You can't just expect something because you want it. There has to be a case that you have to bring up, as Patty mentioned before. All right, let's move on to the next slide, just for time's sake. So Patty, I don't know if you want to talk about the picture in the
Yeah,
slide or.
sure. It's really a tug of war. I mean, whichever way you want to put it, you could put the recruiters on the right-hand side, and you could put the candidates on the left-hand side who got the offers. And, any negotiation situation is a tug of war. And sometimes in negotiations, people think they have to win, quote unquote. No, winning is not good, because this is a company you want to spend time with. This is a company that's going to look at your negotiation and decide, do I really want to work with this person? Will this person be good for the company? Will this person have to win on every project, or what assignments he or she gets? I'm not so sure. And, we didn't send the offer in writing yet. So it could be a huge turnoff. The best negotiation situation for almost anything is a win-win for both sides. So you have to give a little and you have to take something. And most good recruiters and managers understand that too.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm on the next slide there.
Yeah, I see it. And I'm glad you have that there, because when I did my last round of recruiting for sales type people, and we needed a bunch of them because we had a lot of resignations, I got maybe 50% of the people I needed to hire would send me emails about this. I gave a verbal about what we were thinking of for the offer. And then like 24 hours later, I get a long email about what their needs are, what they want. Even if they had the best reason in the world, it limits their negotiation, because they're not having, nowadays, not a face-to-face, but an interactive conversation. Because what if you're talking to the person you're negotiating with, and all of a sudden you realize there's something else you could bring to the table, or the manager or the recruiter says, gee, Sally brought up some good points, and she's not really pushing me. She's just explaining her value and her worth. And she's doing it on the phone. She's not doing it in an email. And when we all get back, some of us get back to working in an office, she made an appointment to come back. So otherwise, you're going to back yourself into a corner on whatever you wrote. And also, you may write something and it may not sound too good. You may not look good in your tone. So that's very risky. So I would say always do it on the phone, or if you can, in person. And, be specific. Don't waste a lot of their time. And, a lot of the things are here too. Repeat again what you can offer the company.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think that if it's something that you can give up, I would I would just do it right away. It shows that you're willing to have a win-win situation.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
people get relaxed when they hear that. They'll say, they'll think to themselves, oh, gee, I thought this was going to be a difficult conversation. This person's asking for 8 things or 5 things, but already she's telling me, you know what, we can forget about X. We can forget about the vacation days. And that helps the other person relax and then be more willing to give something back in return.
Okay.
All right, this is just a style thing. And again, if you have practice, you can even tape yourself or video yourself, like a mock interview. In fact, maybe, I don't know if the Star Center offers sort of mock interviews, mock
Yeah,
salary
we do.
negotiations. Great.
Yeah, we do. Take
I
advantage of
would
that
sign up.
because like Patty is mentioning, practice is so important. I mean, even if you're working there, just like an interview, it's so important how you're going to ask for things, and that's not just what you say. So practice is important because you want to plan how people might respond to your requests. And so I think practice is important, and verbiage is important because the word need, must, have to are negative things. So make sure that these are sort of things that elicit a more defense response. So I feel like saying that you must have something and you have to have something is a very a natural response for people is to create a wall. So I think that's important to take away from things like that.
Right, exactly. In fact, I had a situation myself where it was a privately held company, and I almost didn't want to interview because I knew what they were offering or the range. And, I went in and I was sort of educated on what I could offer to them. And they still were not, they were budging, but not a whole lot on the base salary. So I directed the conversation. I said, well, do you give bonuses for this position? And I think it never occurred to them because they're not really a bonus giving organization. And then we went on that track to discuss that. And we had a good agreement on, and this is an important phrase, total compensation. If your base and they agree to give you a bonus or up your bonus or some other things that you can value for a certain amount of money, and like what Marion said about, making sure you have, maybe they cover some of your insurance, that's just as good. And that's how we settled on that. And then I got bonuses, and I didn't care if it came as a bonus or it came as a base salary. I had to wait for the bonus. But then we talked about when I would be bonus eligible, and I negotiated that to be 3 months because I said, look, you're going to be so impressed with what I bring to the table and what I have to offer that, I know that you're going to want to give it to me in 3 months instead of 6 months.
Yeah. I'll answer this question because it's relevant to the slide and we'll move on. We'll definitely answer everyone's question by the end. It says alternative words to okay, yup, or yes. I think when I put this in the slide, it's basically don't answer very casually and don't answer short answers. It's really important to have a discussion rather than short conversation. So make sure that whenever conversation, whether you're not working there or you're working internally and you're moving around, be mindful about what you say. And that's really, so instead of okay and yup and yes, be elaborate in what you're talking about and how you're responding and not just quick and casual. That's sort of the purpose of that thing.
Right.
Okay. And I think, yeah. So I think we've talked about this already. It's basically just be mindful how you say things because that makes a huge point because you don't want to be sort of very negative when you approach conversations about negotiating packages or salaries because people do get turned off. Because that is another factor that they're going to decide whether this is a person they see working in their organization or their team. So when you make demands, that's important to be mindful that how you're saying, don't use the word demands, but you're requesting or having a conversation. So I think that's sort of in the slide. I don't want to keep too. I think we discussed that already about being mindful. So I don't think I just want to move for time, just for time's sake. Um, Here, just to cover this, just basically, I mean, for me, I've created this grid just so that when you get multiple offers, hopefully everyone gets multiple offers. I recently had an alum that I'm working with that she's gotten a couple of offers. And, she was like, well, which one's better? I'm like, I can't make that decision for you because I don't have the whole package. And I'm not really going to look at the whole package and decide that for that person. But what I do give is this sort of grid to start matching what would be a better offer and what not. Because some companies will say, I'll give you this if I give you that, depending on how seasoned you are. So that's important to have something visually to see at, because once you see everything from one offer to the other, visually it makes more sense versus if you're just thinking about it. If you're thinking about it, you can't visually compare it side by side. But if you put it side by side, kind of like when you buy something on Amazon and it starts comparing you other products to the similar, and it gives you little checks about what it has and what it doesn't have compared to the other things. That's kind of what you want to do with packages as well. So when you visually see it, it's easier to have a more educated decision when you visually see it in front of you. And that's what that grid is for. And I think this is our last slides, and then we'll have Q&A. Do you want to do the recap, Patty?
Yeah, sure. These are the points that are really emphasized, that if you're going to remember anything coming away from this, I'm sure you'll remember a lot. But the research is important, because otherwise, how are you going to know what you're going to ask? You'll come off more confident if you did do your research instead of you grasping at straws. And what was also mentioned is writing down your accomplishments. I mean, just like on your resume, I'm sure a lot of you have, especially if you worked with the STAR counselors, you have down your accomplishments, not just what your job duties are. And develop your speech, rehearse it. You really should make an appointment, even virtually with the STAR Center, to rehearse your ask, to rehearse it, and ask if you can even make a second appointment. Just keep doing it. Friends, relatives, colleagues, very important. You'll sound much better, and you'll put the other person at ease, because when you get feedback that it looks like you're tense or you're angry or you didn't let the interviewer speak, you may not realize it while you're doing it, and somebody else can point it out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we at STAR, we service any alum that got their undergraduate degree at Baruch. There are other career services. So there is the graduate school. They have their own career services. Marks has their own career services for graduate student, and Weissman has their own career services. So if you have any questions about that, just let me know. But if you did get your undergraduate at Baruch, you can definitely make an appointment through Star Search. That's the platform that we use to have a discussion with one of the career counselors. So that's one way definitely to do that. So we're around, we're all working 100% remotely. Our office is generally open 9 to 5. If that is doesn't work with your schedule, you can always email the email I sent, or I'll send you again. And you could sort of ask them what's a good time for everyone. All right, so now this is the Q&A section. So let me just go through some of the questions that we didn't ask. Patty, have you ever seen offers rescinded after a candidate asked for a higher salary when negotiating?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. Does that scare everybody? Because good, I hope it does scare you. Legally, if they gave you a verbal offer and you didn't get it in writing, then they have no obligation to hire you. What they'll do is they may get back to you. They may not tell you that's the reason, that they didn't like what you negotiated or they couldn't pay you. They may just say, we thought we were going to hire you, but the department decided to go in a different direction. End of story. And that's it. They go on to the next person. So it does happen. It is a reality. And always keep that in the back of your mind. I think you have to be even more appropriate on a negotiation than even an interview. And you can't go back and, beg them to hire you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, with negotiating, there is a level of risk that you want to be mindful of when you're negotiating. But for me, from my experience, I've never been taken the wrong way. I think it's important to at least be mindful about how you say something. So, for example, I think this might answer someone's question. So, I was managing the career services at Fordham University in the Lincoln Center campus, career services office, and I decided after a few years, I decided I wanted to backpack through Europe because that's something, one of those bucket lists that's important for me. And so I left and for a year and backpacked, and then decided it's time to go back to work. And so I got the job as a diversity manager. And I remember um, taking this call at the public library on 34th and Madison. And he gave me the package offer, got a chance to review it and so forth. And then I remember that the vacation days was less than I would have liked. And so because coming from higher ed to corporation, of course, it doesn't match. But I didn't want it to match, but I wanted it to be a little higher. And I remember the HR person who made the package offer said to me, if I gave you those vacation days, you would have more vacation days than me, and I've been here for over 5 years. And so that was his response, I remember. And of course, how do you respond to that, right? It's hard to respond to that. But of course, my response back was, it's hard for me to consider everyone's packages and what people get paid. Though I basically said in my nice voice, it's absolutely open for discussion. These are just things that I know I was getting paid. And this is the vacation days I received from my previous employer. And I'm just trying to find the balance between the two organizations. And of course, he got back within 5 minutes and honored everything that I basically requested. And that was, I think, my last employer that I basically negotiated very hard because I felt like I had just gotten back. There was no rush. That was my situation. So that's important to understand your situation. But it worked out for me, And the other thing that someone asked, a lot of, I know Patty mentioned like government, state company organizations related to that. There is a lot more stricter things on salary and negotiation, but I always say like there's still always room for negotiation. I always say like, I was at a job at one of the CUNYs, and it was a tenure position. And I remember when I had asked for a negotiation, he says, you know what, you're already at the end of the salary band, because the way CUNY works is these 3 different bands. Just know that's how it worked. So I was already at the end, so therefore there was no really higher thing. So, but of course, I said, absolutely, I just wanted to have a conversation because based on X, Y, and Z, this is what I think I should be getting paid. And of course, what happens, they get back an hour later and they say, we'll start you in the second band. After they said there's no room for negotiation. And again, it's not about forcing a certain value or demanding a certain thing. It's just having a conversation about what it is you're requesting or asking for, right? So, Patty, one question for you. How should one counteroffer if one has been unemployed for over a year, but has upgraded his or her skills along the way?
Okay, that last sentence is very important. You should be active, whether it be volunteering, a part-time job, consulting, and be ready to talk about what you did and how you would bring more to the table by what you did and what you did from your last company. Spell it out for them. And if you've researched the company, you may know what that they need somebody that has more experience in something that you have. So try to divert it, but give them the information, because if they want to hire you, they may need to go to someone else to get approval. The hiring process is usually, unless it's a privately held small company, decision makers are up the ranks. So they have to present it and they have to show the resume. And a lot of times someone higher up looks at the resume and says, oh, Fred hasn't worked for a year. You have to give them the script, the person you're talking to, the bullet points that they have to convey to someone else. And by the way, that goes for salary increases too. So if you could do that, it's very helpful. The second thing, and I don't know the background of everyone in the audience. If you've heard of returnship programs, originally they started with just women who were out of the workplace for 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, raising children. And then they had high-powered or good jobs. They had to leave the job to raise the kids, or it could even be the husband. and the woman, was doing the work. And I chair a returnship company, a returnship program for the Financial Women's Association and 3 big companies. And they provide jobs and internships for women and men who have left the workplace, handling a sick parent, a returning veteran, someone who's been out for a while. We have workshops. I'm not going to go on too much longer, but it's just, there are a lot of these things going on. So if you've been out of the workplace for a little while, you may want to check out some of those things also, because it's not a sin to be out of work. Mostly everybody has been out of work, sometimes a year or more.
Yeah. I just want to conclude, and then me and Patty will stick around a little bit if anyone wants to stay and ask more questions. I just don't want to go over time, but we will stay over. So I just want to, Greg from Alumni Relations is going to say a few things in a little bit, but I wanted to just say thank you everyone for coming. Again, I'll stay behind, and Patty, if you want to stay behind, I'm happy to answer more questions, because there's a bunch more questions, but I want to be respectful of people's time. I'm also, one last thing, I'm going to put a link, if you would kindly just take less than a minute to fill out the survey that just helps us sort of improve our workshops and things like that. That's important for us. And so if you would kindly just fill out the survey, I'm going to put in the link, in the chat link in a second. That way we can sort of improve our services. Let me just put that in the chat, and then I'll do that. And then Greg, if you want to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marion. I just wanted to thank all of our alumni who logged in today and for being such an engaged group and asking such great questions. Thank you so much to Marion and Patty. You guys were great. It was fascinating to listen to this. And I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations. We'll send an email out after this event with the recording, as well as some links to future events that we'll be hosting in the next couple of months. And we hope to see you guys on here again. And please stick around and ask more questions to Marion and Patty. So just wanted to thank you from the Office of Alumni Relations.
And I'm going to start the